show. Hope all of you enjoyed the Super Bowl, whatever you did. Hope you had a great time. Of course, the Kansas City Chiefs secured their second Super Bowl in the last 4 years, thanks to Patrick Mahomes and a brilliant second half performance that saw the Chiefs come back from a double-digit deficit. Only the second time in Super Bowl history did a team have a double-digit deficit that they had to overcome at halftime, and they ultimately won. The first was the Patriots against the Atlanta Falcons a few years ago, and now the Kansas City Chiefs write their name into history with their win over the Eagles. As always, we're joined by a number of people on our show, but most importantly, Adam, that's at Spotter AJ for all of you following on Twitter. Adam, you've done such a brilliant job for us over the course of the season, giving a lot of football analysis. We're obviously going to do a lot of talking about this Super Bowl, but let me just first ask, how was your Super Bowl Sunday? Did you have a good time? What was the party like? What was the vibe like on your Super Bowl Sunday?
So I'm not much of a party guy when it comes to Super Bowl. I'm not much of a party guy when it comes to any football games, to be honest with you. I like to be either left alone or minimal so I can hear what's going on and everything. And some people are like that and some people aren't, but I'm usually dialed in. But no, it was good. It was a profitable Super Bowl, which is great. I tailed you on your Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown pick, and I tailed Blease on the defensive special teams touchdown. So the scoop and score was awesome. For that to come in and hit. And my game mode plays that I gave you guys last week, over 4.5 rushing attempts and over 18.5 rushing yards, both came in. So the player props were good. I kind of laid off. I did have Philly minus the one. Very small play at the end there. And I knew it was a mistake when I played it too, because, just betting against Mahomes is so hard to do. But all in all, it was good. Hate to see the NFL season go, but when you can leave on a profit, that's a good thing.
Feel the exact same way, Adam. We had a very similar Super Bowl Sunday. First of all, it was definitely feeling the tension of all the bets, getting the stopwatch out for Chris Stapleton and everything else. But our player prop bets, our kind of specialty prop bets did pretty well also, but we missed on the game. I'll be the first to admit it. I had the Eagles on the money line. I did early in the week have Chiefs +3, so at least I did cash some tickets there. But Eagles on the money line, Eagles -1 the day of the game, and the under. I was really believing in that Eagles defense, and the scoop and score hurt me. The punt return by Tony that got the Chiefs into range hurt me, but there were just a lot of points scored anyways. So as much as I felt the under, missed on that one, but fortunately Blease did call us out on a defensive touchdown, a defensive score. He did a great job there. Appreciate all of you guys joining us. For everyone that's listening, make sure you follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Butt Fumble Sports is the name. On Twitter, @SportsFumble is where you're listening to us on Twitter Spaces. And of course, go to our website, buttfumblesports.com. We're putting out content every day. All the merchandise that we have for our company is there. A lot of custom designs that you'll want to check out. And a weekly newsletter with all of our picks for weekend plays. But we are in the NFL Weekly Show, so let's get down to it. And we'll talk specifically about the Super Bowl and our reactions to Super Bowl 57. Adam, Mahomes was brilliant in the second half, 13 of 14. The only incompletion was a throwaway. The Chiefs' offense in their 4 possessions in the second half went touchdown, 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 game-winning field goal. Was that more of a statement about Patrick Mahomes and his brilliance, or, like so many people have been saying after the fact, were we overrating the Philadelphia Eagles for a majority of the season, maybe due to opponents or quarterbacks that they played? Do you feel it's Mahomes that deserves the credit, or should we call out the Eagles' defense?
Well, I think, to me, Mahomes deserves a lot of credit. But I think when you can make halftime adjustments and have the coaching staff that Andy Reid has around him with Eric Bieniemy, which I'm still not sure why he's not getting any looks to be a head coach with some of these coaches that got hired in the last 2 days or so with a lot less resume than he has. But I think when you do make second half adjustments with the talent that you have in Mahomes and the coaching that you have around him to game plan for that, I think that all goes hand in hand. But I do agree with you. I think that the Eagle, I don't want to say the Eagles defense is overrated, but I do think the opponent note that you did there about how they may have not played up to the high level opponents that Kansas City has this year might have been something into it. But in my opinion, I think Mahomes, with his talent, the coaching staff, the scheme at halftime, and them being there before, not panicking, and getting back in the football game kind of all ties into it.
The Chiefs have done a really good job over the last few years of rebuilding their offensive line. They acquired Joe Thuney, however you pronounce it, of the Patriots, who's a really good interior offensive lineman. Wiley and Brown on the corners. They obviously got Brown from the Ravens in a trade. And Creed Humphrey was one of the best offensive line draft picks over the last few years. The Chiefs just did a brilliant job at building this wall around Patrick Mahomes. And at times it may have been criticized in the regular season. In the second half of that game, they pitched an absolute shutout. They were unbelievably good. No sacks allowed, zero penalties, and not one negative run. That just speaks to how the offensive line of the Chiefs really set the tone in the second half. And I was really surprised for a number of reasons. One, I thought the Eagles were going to be the team to do that. They had so many offensive snaps in the first half. I thought they were going to be the offense that was wearing down the opposing defense that would ultimately kind of own the second half. That's not what happened. And second, you think about how much time the Chiefs were on the sidelines. Like, they didn't run an offensive play for some crazy amount of time. I thought they said like it was an hour and 23 minutes, like something crazy like that. The whole point being they were fresh, but you could have argued that they weren't involved in the game, and yet it didn't show at all in the second half. And I know a lot of people are talking about the field and how people were slipping around. That was the case, and yet that offensive line owned the defensive pass rush of the Eagles. I didn't hear about Hassan Reddick. I didn't hear about Fletcher Cox. I didn't hear about any of these guys. I mean, it was really one of the best offensive line performances that I can think of over the last few years. And again, it really speaks to how the Kansas City Chiefs have built a champion. They found their superstar quarterback, yes, but that's not enough. They really moved a lot of pieces. Adam, I know we credit Andy Reid, and you brought up Eric Bieniemy. I actually want to get to that point that you just made, why he's not a head coach. Do you feel like it's because between Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and this unbelievable team that the front office has assembled, that Eric Bieniemy's contribution is not graded appropriately, that he isn't given enough of the credit? Or do you think it's just the racism of the league and that the NFL is handing out, two head coaching positions to Eagles coordinators who happen to be white, and he obviously is not, and thus he's not getting them? Which do you think it is?
Well, the one thing I will say is the narrative I always heard with Eric Bieniemy was that, the Chiefs are always making a deep playoff run. So his interviews, he's always the last to be interviewed, behind 4 or 5 candidates. But I can't, how can you stand by that when you just have, like you just mentioned, the 2 Eagles coordinators just got hired after the Super Bowl, right, to Arizona, Indianapolis. So I think that kind of blows that theory out of the water. So I'm not really sure if one or two things are happening. He just doesn't interview well, or, he isn't viewed as a leader by these teams that are interviewing him. Or maybe when they're interviewing him, they're realizing maybe he isn't as integral as a part of the offense with Andy Reid as Kansas City is. Now, I have a hard time believing in the 5-6 years, of this huge run that they've had, that he isn't an impactful person of game design and game plan with Andy Reid. But to me, I'm not sure what it is. I think Eric Bieniemy, like I said, it could be behind the scenes. Maybe he does interview well, like I said. But to me, I'm not really sure. I don't think it's a racism thing. I just don't like the narrative of saying that, well, he can't get a head coaching job because he's always going so deep in the playoffs. Because in my opinion, if you take a look at on paper right now with the 3 candidates, the 2 that just got hired, the Gannon and the Steichen, and against Eric Bieniemy, you can't tell me that their resumes are better. I mean, Gannon, for example, has only been a defensive coordinator for 1 year. He was defensive backs coach for a few years. He kept the Eagles defensive coordinator in 2021 until this season. And Steichen has been offensive coordinator with the Chargers in 2020, and then this year, so 2 years offensive coordinator. So their resume to Bieniemy's, to me, doesn't hold water. So I don't think it's a racism thing. I just think maybe behind the scenes, maybe Bieniemy isn't viewed as a leader of a football team.
I completely agree with you, but there are a lot of things about Eric Bieniemy's situation that don't quite make sense to me. We'll reel it back in. We'll go back to the Super Bowl. One thing that really stood out to me, we talk a lot about you want to win the turnover battle. Obviously, the Chiefs did, only kind of benefiting from Jalen Hurts making a really unfortunate blunder, because other than that, he had a spectacular game. We'll get to that in a moment. But the Kansas City Chiefs, they did a great job of winning the 3 phases of the game. Obviously, Mahomes was outstanding in the second half. Their defense played better in the second half. I mean, it still gave up a lot of points, and really, but they were just the drives that the Eagles went on were so long and so consistently, getting down the field, in 17 plays. It's just a crazy amount of time to be on the field. But that said, where the Chiefs got such a major advantage was in special teams. I know Harrison Butker had the missed kick, but Tony made up for everything with that special teams with that return. And Adam, I look at like the New York Giants. Don't you think they missed someone with that kind of speed? We saw Tony in special teams. We saw Tony on that touchdown route that he ran. It was one of the things that stood out to me is, again, and I'm talking about why the Chiefs won. Mahomes, obviously, number one, offensive line, number two. But I really keep going back to how this team was built and how you built a champion in Kansas City. And part of it was acquiring a perfect speed piece in the return game and in the receiving game that you lacked without Tyreek Hill there. And Kadarius Toney is a perfect poor man's Tyreek Hill. And I really thought that showed itself in the Super Bowl. And it also made me go, how did the New York Giants let this guy go?
Yeah, I think that deal with the New York Giants was he was hurt all the time, right? And there was back and forth, and he became healthy, was playing time. So I don't think that was ever from the start. I do believe this is the player that the Giants envisioned when they drafted him, but sometimes it just goes south from the start with a player when he gets drafted to an organization. So you're right, Kansas City getting him in is how they keep rolling down the line. And let's not overlook Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, what a good draft choice he was to bring him in.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, so, not only getting Tony, but, the draft choices they brought in too. Leo Chanel at linebacker to help that defense, albeit from Wisconsin, but a little partial. But then again, he's a good team guy. He's a good effort guy. He's a good hustle guy. So bringing in a guy like Pacheco, bringing in a guy like Tony, bringing in a guy like Chanel, that can't be understated to the front office management of Kansas City and what they're doing either.
And Pacheco, I know he cashed in on a lot of our tickets. We had him on some rushing totals, and he cashed on those. I want to give a big shout out to Bleece, who's doing a great job for us. Make sure you follow Bleece at BLEACENFT. Bleece, what you got for us?
Yeah, and don't sleep on the Melvin Gordon. I mean, Melvin Gordon gets a ring. He really contributed a lot to this win. No, and just to go on the second half, like Andy Reid was masterful at getting the matchup he wanted. If you look at some of these, like the Travis Kelce play when he switched off defenders and like how he schemed the second half, I mean, was masterful and like got the matchups he wanted. He was, taking all of his notes in the first half and really exploited it in the second half. I just thought he was brilliant and just showed his genius in that second half. And I think it is attributed more to him than it is Bieniemy. And then it's, Patrick Mahomes making stuff up as he goes. But I don't know where Bieniemy fits in that. And another part is like, I mean, has he come out and said like he may like being a coordinator? Like not everyone's made to be a head coach. Like I think he's a perfect piece there. I don't know if you want to speak on that.
Well, I think he wants it. I think everyone wants kind of professional advancement, or at least most do. What stands out to me is something must have come out of the building. To your point, Bleece, to Adam's point, how can you go this many years and you're not given the opportunity? Yes, there could be racism. I'm not going to discount that. But there's also something that's like maybe word's gotten out that he's good, but to your point, he's good in a system, or he's good with an Andy Reid, or he's good in the offensive coordinator role, but he's not the right guy. And that's not speaking of race, that's speaking of personality and just temperament and everything else. And you wonder, because at this point, why isn't he getting those opportunities? And those have started to even fade. Like he was a hot candidate a couple years ago, and I'm not hearing the same things now. Certainly not as a head coach. I'm hearing things about him like offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders, which would seem like an odd move unless he wants to prove he can win without Patrick Mahomes, thus proving he could be a head coach. But what really stands out to me, Bleece, is exactly what you said. I think you called it dead right. Andy Reid needed to draw up and design great plays. He did not have the mobility of Mahomes in the same way. I know we saw Mahomes run, but he certainly didn't have the same kind of athleticism that he normally does. Andy Reid didn't have the kind of weapons that he's had in years past. He didn't have Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce as that 1-2 punch, that Randy Moss, Wes Welker that you can kind of play off of. He had to design some plays, whether it was the play to Tony for the touchdown or Sky Moore for the touchdown. You saw Andy Reid design a brilliant play using speed or the qualities of the players that he had to their ultimate best. And in both cases, that player was wide open and could have somersaulted into the end zone. And how does that happen? Great coaching. Great coaching. That's what does that. Patrick Mahomes was great, but I agree with you, Blease. I actually thought this was one of Andy Reid's best performances. And to your point, we talk a lot about Andy Reid being one of the best coaches after a bye week, but that didn't show itself early on. It wasn't first half Andy Reid that really that has us captivated, has us talking. No, it's how well he adjusted in the second half. Now, whether he was slow playing it, sometimes they say you don't want to actually show your trick plays in the first half because then they can adjust to it. You don't want to show your hand in the first half because then they can go in the locker room and adjust to it. But Andy Reid was so brilliant in the second half. You almost wonder if he was intentionally like boxing left. So in the second half, he could go to his strong hand right. Blease, what do you think?
Yeah, I didn't even bring up the plays where the player was just wide open. And how about that trick play where he had the two players looking off to the sideline like they were confused? I just thought that was so good. That was so good. And I could just see him prepping that play and just giggling to himself, like, I'm going to get them looking over this way. I thought that was so good and such an Andy Reid play. But yeah, those plays where the player was wide open, it's like that's how confused he had that defense, and that just shows you like what a mastermind he had. That defense just completely figured out and knew their exact weakness.
Number one pass defense during the regular season. And don't get me wrong, they didn't allow a lot of pass yards in the game. But to your point, just because a lot of people say like you can't teach speed. Yeah, but you still have to coach it. You still have to play design for it. Just because you have speed doesn't mean you always successfully use it. And what was so incredible about Andy Reid in the second half is he used that speed so effectively that his players didn't even need to turn on their speed. They needed it in the route running, but once they caught the ball, again, they could have tiptoed, they could have strutted, they could have walked into the end zone, and they pretty much did. Masterful performance, really sets a whole new standard. I think it pushes, obviously, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and Travis Kelce into that next tier of greatness in their respective fields. Andy Reid now goes down as one of the greatest head coaches of all time. Patrick Mahomes, you could argue, is already in the top five. We'll get to that in a little bit. And Travis Kelce, it's either him or Gronk at this point for who's the best. Again, something we'll get to in a little bit. But one last thing I want to touch on before we move on to some games, and that is the performance by Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was masterful. He might have been the best single player on the field on Super Bowl Sunday, but unfortunately, his one blunder is what will be remembered, that turnover. And the worst part about it for me is it wasn't a great defensive play. If a defensive player had put their helmet on the ball, or there was a great Peanut Tillman punch that had gotten it out, we would have said, oh, that's a great defensive play. But unfortunately, Jalen Hurts just lost the ball in exchange from one arm to the other. And I feel terrible for the young man because he played brilliantly well, and yet it's what stands out. Adam, do you think Jalen Hurts is a top five quarterback? Do you think this cemented his status? Did this game change your opinion of him? And do you think we'll see Jalen Hurts in a Super Bowl, let's say within the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, 3 to 5 years is going to be interesting because the Philadelphia Eagles have a lot of free agents coming up here and players to sign to get under the cap. So it's going to be interesting to see what Philly does to try to keep this Super Bowl team together. I do. I'm the same way with you. I feel horrible for Hurts. I think this is a big stage for him to finally, if there's any doubters left, I think he quieted them. I mean, honestly, essentially the MVP, between him and Mahomes this game, he did a masterful job. He did everything right. Other, like you said, that one play where he fumbled the football. Everything else was on par. I mean, 3 touchdowns in this game, 1 through the air, just phenomenal. I mean, he played I wouldn't want to say flawless football game, obviously, because he had the fumble, but I think he cemented himself as the quarterback of the future for the Philadelphia Eagles. And the thing is, he's played in a lot of big-time football games. I mean, all his games at Alabama. I know he went through the struggles with Tua, but look what he did. When he got benched for Tua and Tua came on the championship game, he didn't cry and whine about it, right? He just took it like a man and said, you know what, maybe, this is Tua's team now. I'm going to step back and go to Oklahoma. Went to Oklahoma and played. Everything he's done, he's kind of handled with class. So I really pull for the guy. And I'm glad that he had this kind of football game, because leading up to this game, it was like, oh, well, they beat a bad Giants team who shouldn't have been in the playoffs. And, oh, they beat a 49ers team without Brock Purdy down to their fourth-string quarterback. So he's always had the narrative against them. But to be in the big stage against Kansas City, albeit, Kansas City's defense isn't looking at like a vaunted defense in the NFL, but to perform at the highest level in this stage, I think really says something about Hurts, and I'm glad for him. I just hate the fact of the outcome of the football game.
I feel the same way. He is one of my favorite players in all of sports, not just football. This, and I say young man only because I don't, I want to put him in his proper status, because this is one of the most mature, pulled together people I've ever seen on this big a stage. And we talk a lot about athletes and how they represent themselves and the qualities that they have on and off their field of play. Jalen Hurts should be the role model for how everybody handles success and defeat, challenges and victory. He has been remarkable. When he was at Alabama and succeeding, I didn't hear anything about him. As in, I only heard about work ethic. I only heard about what he does as a leader, what he does as a member of the team. I didn't hear him in anything else. He dealt with the Tua situation brilliantly. He leaves, he goes to Oklahoma, does nothing but represent himself with class, never said anything bad about Alabama, just represented the Sooners well, and continued to make strides. Again, all of this while he continues to improve, because the Jalen Hurts who was at Alabama and the Jalen Hurts now, significantly different player. Much more efficient, better with his arm, smarter about how he runs, more in command, obviously, of the offense. And that doesn't just come with age. That comes with development. And Jalen Hurts is class. And I rarely use that word about an athlete, but he is class personified. I was so impressed by his post-game press conference, which is, again, should be used for every single person, not just an athlete, but everyone. When you lose, when you have defeat, it's either a lesson or you're missing the point. And do I think Jalen Hurts is going to be back? I have no doubt. That guy is a winner. And what's interesting is he's been a winner at Alabama and Oklahoma and at Philadelphia, where I don't even think he was the best version of what we'll see from Jalen Hurts. This guy is going to be a better quarterback in 3 years than he is now. That's kind of scary. He outplayed Patrick Mahomes in a Super Bowl. Like, if this guy gets better, it's really, and funny enough, the person he actually reminds me of, not in terms of skill set, but in terms of development. And I hate to do this to him because this is the guy you don't want to be compared to because it's unfair, but it's Tom Brady. It's Tom Brady. It's, you had to deal in college with someone you had to compete for your job with. And you didn't always win. There were times you got benched. How did you handle that? You got better. You developed. You continued to strive towards a better version of yourself. Great, you made it to the pros, and then you had success. But it's, again, you're not the best. You're not the reason we're winning. You're the reason we're not losing, or the defense is great, or we're a running team. But you can see, just like Brady, again, not the same style, but Brady learned how to become a great passing quarterback rather than a game manager. I could see the same thing coming from Hurts. He is a game manager now who is unbelievable at scoring touchdowns. But over time, I think this guy's going to be a really good pocket passing quarterback. You saw some of the arm strength, but I think we're just tipping the edge of potential when it comes to Jalen Hurts. And I know I'm going off about him, but I am a big fan, much like Adam, and I wish him well. Okay, that covers our reactions to Super Bowl 57. Again, make sure you follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and make sure you go to our website, buttfumblesports.com, to get all of our reactions to Super Bowl Sunday in case you missed anything we said, or you want to check out some more of our reactions or some of those bets that we did cash. We are going to turn the